The Galapagos Islands are often seen as one of the last untouched frontiers, isolated, wild, and uniquely uninhabited by humans until recent centuries. But what if that story isn't quite true? What if new genetic research is uncovering the faint traces of human visitors long before the first Spanish ships ever arrived? Could Polynesians or other ancient mariners have reached these remote volcanic shores and left behind a biological signature instead of a cultural one? Before we start, I'm on a road to get 1,000 subscribers as a small channel. If you want to help me, please subscribe. The Galapagos Islands lie more than 1,000 kilometers west of mainland Ecuador, born from fiery volcanic activity deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. With no freshwater rivers, unpredictable currents, and a harsh landscape of lava rock and sparse vegetation, these islands seemed an unlikely home for early humans. Historians have long held that the first people to set foot on the Galapagos were European sailors in the 16th century, Spaniards who stumbled upon the archipelago in 1535. Later came whalers, pirates, and eventually settlers, with Ecuador officially claiming the islands in 1832. For centuries, this narrative stood unchallenged. The Galapagos were presumed to have been pristine and untouched by human presence until early modern history. There were no known indigenous settlements, no oral traditions pointing to habitation, and no major archaeological structures, nothing to suggest prehistoric people had ever visited, let alone lived there. But new evidence from ancient DNA tells a different and surprising story. For decades, subtle clues suggested the Galapagos might not have been as untouched as once believed. Archaeologists and biologists occasionally stumbled upon puzzling evidence: shell middens buried deep beneath layers of volcanic ash, rodent bones in unexpected stratigraphic layers, and shards of pottery that seemed out of place. While none of these finds were conclusive on their own, they hinted at the possibility of earlier human activity. Could someone have visited these islands long before the Spaniards arrived? Some researchers proposed that Polynesians, masters of ocean navigation, might have reached the Galapagos during their epic trans-Pacific journeys. Others speculated that South American seafarers could have been blown off course or intentionally sailed into the open sea, landing briefly on these volcanic shores. The problem was always the same: no direct evidence, no preserved structures, no burials. But in the absence of traditional artifacts, researchers turned to something new: the genetic residues left behind in the soil and bones. To uncover what the artifacts couldn't say, a team of researchers employed ancient environmental DNA techniques, or cDNA, to search for genetic traces of early human presence. They collected sediment cores from protected caves and coastal middens on several of the islands, focusing on undisturbed layers beneath known colonial debris. Alongside this, they extracted ancient DNA from rodent bones and other introduced species whose presence dated back centuries. The challenge was enormous. Hot, salty, and volcanic conditions make DNA degrade quickly. But advances in hybridization capture and next-generation sequencing allowed them to isolate mitochondrial markers even in minute quantities. When they screened the samples, they weren't just looking for human DNA. They were also searching for signs of domesticated plants, transported animals, and invasive species whose origins could trace back to human movement. The result? Among the fragments of soil and bone, something unexpected surfaced: a genetic fingerprint that didn't match European colonizers or mainland indigenous groups. The analysis revealed human mitochondrial haplogroups that didn't align with the genetic profiles of known indigenous Ecuadorian populations or Spanish settlers. Instead, one of the sequences matched a rare Polynesian lineage, specifically B4A101A, a marker famously associated with the settlement of the Pacific Islands. The presence of this haplotype in Galapagos sediments was a shocking twist. Equally surprising, the ancient rodent DNA extracted from bones in the same stratigraphic layers bore genetic markers linked to species introduced by Polynesians across the Pacific. While there's no direct evidence of Polynesian structures or tools, this biological presence suggests the islands may have experienced brief but real contact with seafarers from Oceania centuries before European discovery. These weren't modern visitors. These genetic traces came from samples securely dated to before the 1500s, hinting at either accidental landfalls or exploratory missions that reached farther east than previously believed. The idea that Galapagos was truly unvisited before Columbus now seems far less certain. The discovery of Polynesian genetic markers in Galapagos sediment and animal remains has sparked intense debate. Could ancient Polynesian navigators, renowned for sailing vast stretches of the Pacific with nothing but stars and swell patterns to guide them, have reached these islands intentionally? Or were these chance landfalls, canoes blown off course during seasonal voyages between South America and Easter Island? The Galapagos lie east of the main Polynesian triangle, beyond the usual limits of ancient Pacific exploration, but Polynesians had already reached Easter Island by 1200 AD, and their maritime expertise made them some of history's greatest ocean voyagers. Perhaps a small group landed in the Galapagos, survived briefly and left, leaving no lasting culture, only fragments of DNA in rodent soils and perhaps imported plants. Whether planned or accidental, their presence challenges the notion of geographic isolation and forces historians to reconsider how far and wide early Pacific cultures may have truly ranged. Even if no long-term Polynesian settlements existed in the Galapagos, the mere possibility of their arrival reshapes how we understand pre-Columbian maritime networks. It suggests that cultural and genetic exchange may have occurred far beyond traditionally mapped boundaries. These brief contacts could have introduced species, altered ecosystems, and added to the broader narrative of human adaptability. They show that early societies didn't simply expand in one direction. They explored, experimented, and sometimes returned home, leaving almost invisible footprints. Galapagos, once seen as biologically pristine, might instead be part of a broader Pacific story, one stitched together by sails and stars. The mitochondrial DNA discovered in sediment layers carried the distinctive Polynesian B40101, a signature, an ancestral marker found throughout the South Pacific, including in Hawaii, Samoa, and Easter Island. This lineage does not occur among mainland South American populations, making its appearance in Galapagos soil particularly compelling. Alongside it, aDNA from ancient rodents showed genetic affinities with Pacific rat species that Polynesians often transported intentionally or accidentally. Some sediment layers even revealed traces of taro and breadfruit DNA, plants not native to the region but staples of Polynesian agriculture. These genetic residues collectively point to a transitory but biologically impactful human presence. The image of the Galapagos as a virgin wilderness, untouched until the age of exploration, is now under revision. Ancient DNA reveals that humans, possibly Polynesians, may have reached these remote islands centuries before the Spanish. They didn't build stone monuments or leave villages behind, but they left something just as telling: genetic traces woven into the DNA of plants, animals, and soil. Their presence was likely brief, perhaps a matter of days or weeks, but meaningful. They may have released animals that reproduced, deposited organic waste containing seeds or skin cells, and then vanished, perhaps carried away by currents or returning to sea. These revelations show that history isn't always recorded in artifacts or stories. Sometimes it's buried in the soil, preserved in microscopic strands of DNA that outlast wood, stone, or myth. The Galapagos are no longer a blank slate, but a page with faint ink slowly brought to light by science. The discovery of ancient Polynesian DNA in the Galapagos opens the door to a cascade of new questions. Could there be buried remains of early visitors in unexplored lava tubes or beach caves? Might deeper sediment cores reveal older or more concentrated genetic evidence? Future research aims to expand DNA sampling across more islands, apply improved dating techniques, and compare findings with Polynesian remains from Easter Island and beyond. There's also interest in detecting early ecological impacts, like changes in tortoise populations or soil microbiomes, that could signal temporary human activity. Much remains unknown, but the genetic trail is far from cold. The Galapagos have always fascinated scientists, but now they're challenging historians too. Ancient DNA is showing us that even islands long considered untouched may have hosted forgotten visitors, navigators who left behind no stories, only silent biological traces. The presence of Polynesian markers in the soil and bones of the Galapagos invites us to rethink how far ancient people truly traveled and how history is preserved. If DNA can rewrite the story of these remote islands, what other hidden histories might be waiting? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like and subscribe for more.